The political ideas of the Enlightenment came directly from the scientific revolution. One of the famous thinkers of this time period was John Locke. He was a philosopher who believed that people were basically good and moral. He is going to write the book Two Treatises of Government, in which he states that people were entitled to natural rights, which were things that everyone has from the time they are born. Locke believed that everyone had the right to life, liberty, and property. He also believed that governments should be formed specifically to protect these natural rights. The best form of government, he felt, had to be one with limited power, so not an absolute monarch like they had at the time. According to Locke, the government had an obligation to its citizens. If a government failed to live up to its obligations or did not respect a person's basic rights, then it was the people's right to overthrow that government and create a new one. John Locke's ideas are going to help lead to the French Revolution and the American Revolution. His ideas were greatly believed and liked by people like Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. As you could see from 3 lines in Locke's beliefs, life, liberty, and property, those ideas will be used by Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Hobbes is another philosopher who is pretty much the opposite of Locke. He had a very dark view on human nature. He is going to write the book Leviathan, and in it he's going to say that people were greedy and selfish, and therefore they needed the government to control them. According to Hobbes, people existed in what he called a state of nature. And in this state, people were uncontrolled, and life would be, as he would say, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So according to Hobbes, there needed to be created a social contract where the people would willingly give up their state of nature and create an organized society. He said the best way to create this society was to have a powerful government that could make its people do what was necessary for the good of society. Hobbes believed that the best form of government was absolute monarchy. Baron de Montesquieu, he is going to be a philosopher from France, and he studied all forms of government from the ancient to modern times. And much like John Locke, Montesquieu did not like the idea of absolute monarchies. He's going to write an essay in 1748 called Spirit of the Laws, and in it Montesquieu credited the British and their idea of limited monarchy. He believed in what they had done in Great Britain. He liked how the British implemented what he considered to be 3 separate branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and judicial branches, while 3 branches that are used in the United States today. So when the founding fathers of the United States were deciding how to create our government, Montesquieu was one of the philosophers that they were looking to at the time. To Montesquieu, a separation of powers was the best way to maintain liberty for a society. Montesquieu's system is what's used in America today. It calls for checks and balances, and no one branch could be more powerful than the others. Voltaire famously said that he lived to say what he thought. He was a very controversial figure in France, and he used a combination of clever comedy and fiction to express his opinions on the problems during his time. One of his famous works is called Candide, and it was published in 1759. Voltaire specifically denounced government corruption, the practice of the slave trade, and religious exclusivism. His ideas angered not only the Roman Catholic Church, but French government officials, so much so that he was exiled and many of his books were burned, but he continued to publish and share his beliefs. He believed in free speech so much that he defended it no matter how he was punished. One of his famous quotes was, "I do not agree with what you are saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." and he was best known for defending the basic right of free speech. Denis Diderot, he is going to be an individual who publishes a 28-volume set of encyclopedias between the years 1751 and 1772. In these encyclopedias, he prints the works of all the political philosophers of the time, like Voltaire, Montesquieu, Locke, and Hobbes. Diderot said his goal was to change the way people thought about government. His encyclopedias challenged the theory of divine right of absolute monarchy. The French government is going to accuse Diderot of eroding the morals of the people of France. The Pope even threatened to excommunicate anyone caught reading Diderot's encyclopedias. But despite the efforts to stop people from reading his encyclopedias, over 20,000 will be printed. People read about the ideas of the Enlightenment, not only in Europe, but across the sea in America as well. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a French philosopher, and he felt like John Locke did, that people were good. However, people were constantly being corrupted by society. In 1762, Rousseau is going to write The Social Contract. And in this, he's going to say that men were born free, and it was society that constantly made people change from good to bad. Rousseau felt that society controlled the way people were shaped and behaved. And however, to Rousseau, some social controls were necessary. A consenting form of government that the people themselves chose, he felt was necessary for the common good. Otherwise, people would surrender their rights. When governed in a system that was based on their consent, the people retained their freedoms because the government was chosen based on the will of the majority. He felt common good should win. So, unlike John Locke, Rousseau believed that one should aim for the good of the community rather than the good of the individual. Mary Wollstonecraft is going to be a famous woman at the time who is going to write about her ideas. To many people, the free and equal ideas of the Enlightenment did not apply to women. Many people felt that women did not have natural rights, or that if they did, they were much more limited in scope than they were for men. So in the 1750s, a small number of women began to argue against this idea, the most famous of which was Mary from England. She protested that women had been left out of the social contract, and she felt that a woman should, first and foremost, be a good mother to her children. However, a woman should be able to think for herself and not be solely dependent on her husband as the breadwinner. In 1792, she's going to write The Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and in this she claimed that the same education that was given to a boy should also be given to a girl because education was a path to freedom and independence. A term that is going to be used during the 1700s is this new form of economic thought called laissez-faire. As scientific thought gave rise to the idea of a person's natural political rights and the best form of government, new forms of economic thought are also going to be developed. And in the 1750s, laissez-faire gave a new meaning to business and the economy. And it was believed that the business and economy should be allowed to operate without any governmental interference. This new idea was the complete opposite of the ideas of mercantilism on which the European economies were running at the time. In mercantilism, nations measured their wealth against each other by the acquisition of precious metals. The new economic philosophers of the Enlightenment said the new wealth was going to come in different forms than gold and silver. Enlightenment philosophers said one should make land as productive as possible, and new wealth would be determined by farming and logging. They said there would be a free trade in these areas, not restricted isolation that defined mercantilism, where colonies would only trade with the mother country. Philosophers of the Enlightenment wanted to open up the colonies to share resources in order to make money. Adam Smith is going to be one of these individuals that believes in laissez-faire. In 1776, he is going to write The Wealth of Nations, in which he described what he called the free market system. In a free market system, a national economy would be subjected to the forces of supply and demand, which would naturally regulate business activity. According to Smith, in business, everything was tied together, from the manufacturing of products to the amount of money an employee was being paid to the level of profit an owner made. All were part of the supply and demand process. If there was a demand for the product, the demand would be met better in an economy run with no government interference. To Smiths, the government's job was to focus on ensuring justice and protecting its people, not interfering with the economy. As the Industrial Revolution grows and spreads, Smith's ideas are going to shape the entire world into the 20th century and even today.